I'd like to call this meeting to order, a regular meeting of the Village Board on Monday, May 6th at 7 p.m. in the Germantown Village Hall Boardroom and also can be accessed via WebEx. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with sections 19.83 and 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. Roll call shows all village board members present except for trustee Kaminsky, who is absent and excused. Are we doing a swearing in tonight? Okay, so everyone's sworn in? Okay, let's do that. Since we have, this is the first meeting with the newly elected board. So congratulations goes, of course, to trustee Warren and trustee Cutts and trustee Miller, and then also trustee Kaminsky, who is not here. And so our village clerk would like to do an official swearing in. If you'd like to stand and be in front of the flags, that would be terrific. That way everybody gets to witness that you are sworn in. Duly sworn in.
Official in front of the flag. So congratulations to each of you. You're going to have to raise your right hand, and then you're just going to go down. We'll start with trustee Warren, and you'll insert your name, trustee Cutts, and then of course trustee Miller. So when we start at the beginning, we're going to state I
trustee Warren.
I am trustee Jan Miller.
having been elected to the office of trustee and have entered upon the duties thereof, do you swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and that you will faithfully discharge the duties of your said office to the best of your abilities?
I do.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Next item is we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. President's report, just a short report tonight. Last week, I was privileged to be involved in the Arbor Day celebration where we had members of the Park and Rec Department. We had children from MacArthur Elementary as part of the kids program there. And then there was representation from the DNR and Gil from the Park and Rec. So we planted a tree. Wetland donated a tree and had their crew out there and planted it. It's in Fireman's Park. It's kind of just on the rise. It replaces an ash tree that was there. And the type of tree it is, I actually forgot what kind of tree it is, but it's a deciduous tree. And it's all around the other pine trees in that area, so you can't miss it. But it was a very nice ceremony, and it's one of the ones that we have to hold every year because we are considered a community or a tree community, and as becoming part of a tree community, there are a certain number of trees that we have to plant every year, and we do have to hold an Arbor Day service, and then that grants us our tree flag that we usually fly out on the flag post out front. So another great ceremony for Arbor Day, and I think the kids enjoyed it too because they all got to take a turn on the shovel and throw dirt in a hole, so they all enjoyed that. Next item is appointment of board, committee, and commission members from the spreadsheet.
Motion on this one?
Yes.
I make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Trustee Chan Miller?
Thank you. As I was reviewing the appointments, there was one of the boards that you may want to, I think you need to review, and that's the Administrative Appeals Review Board. According to our ordinance 1.36, the Administrative Appeals Review Board is comprised of the president, one trustee, and one citizen. And I believe we have, it looks like President Walter and then two trustees.
Who are the two?
Terry Kamensky and David Baum.
We have to flip a coin.
Yeah, well, Terry's not here. No, just kidding.
I don't show that as being one of the appointments for this evening, so I don't have it in front of me,
It's
but
from last week. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Or
we'll
I'm sorry, last time.
review that and I'll talk to both trustees and then we'll look for a citizen appointment. Thank you for pointing that out.
And one other, because I went through the list and I didn't notice any updates on Independence Day Committee.
Because there isn't one. It's going to be run through Park and Rec this year. Further discussion? No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
One opposed.
Motion, please.
Next item on the agenda is announcements of forthcoming events of public interest, committee and department reports. Start with committee reports and committee chairs with trustee Rick Miller.
General Government and Finance will meet in this room on Monday, May 20th at 6 p.m.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Hudson.
Public Safety will meet in this room Monday, June 3rd at 6 p.m.
Okay, and then the next Public Works meeting is,
June 5th, I believe.
June 5th at 5:30 p.m.
thank you very much. Does anyone else have anything else of announcements of forthcoming events of public interest, committee or department reports they'd like to bring forward? Trustee Rick Miller.
Yeah, I'd like to mention that the annual MyFest celebration will be occurring at the Germantown Marketplace on the corner of Squire and Mequon Road on Friday, May 17th, Saturday, the 18th, and Sunday, the 19th. I hope everyone attends. I think they have the most food vendors that they've ever had there. So there should be a lot of food and drink and bands too. Bella Kane is Friday night, and a new band that I've never seen is Smart Mouth is coming Saturday.
All right, terrific. Thank you. Anything else for announcements of forthcoming events of public interest, committee or department reports? Trustee Jan Miller.
I just want to mention that the Park and Rec had their glow walk on Friday, May 3rd, which is this past Friday, and it was well attended. There were probably about 700 people, and that was from 7:30 to 9. And there were lots of kids with face painting and stuff like that. So good time had by all.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for announcements of forthcoming events of public interest, committee or department reports? All right, we can go on to the next item then, is citizen input. If there's anyone within our audience or joining us via WebEx, I'd like to come forward for citizen input. You're welcome to do so at this time. If you're within our audience, please fill out a slip of yellow paper for our county clerk, village clerk, so they get your name and information right. If you're joining us via WebEx, just please make your wishes known so that we can call attention to you.
Okay, can you hear? Okay.
Mhm.
I would like to ask ahead for just a minute or so extra because I'm having a little trouble with my health. I'm a little slow right now, so I want to get through this. I've been coming here, as you know, and our taxes are not to be a stock market gamble. Okay, we have a budget. I haven't seen a budget since I've been coming to these meetings, and I want to know what we're putting in. I'm going to call this week if I feel better and come in. I want to know what our budget is and what we're spending. And I think all you people are wonderful, but I think you're on the wrong path. It's time for the board to either work to represent the constituents or leave. It's ridiculous. You people don't go against anything. All you're doing is spending my money and every taxpayer that's in here. And I mentioned this last time, and so did the residents. And you approving the extension of a TID is absolute against what the taxpayers did not want. and you did it anyway. And you didn't have to. I did some investigating of people who did an investigation of 562 TIDs in given states. And here's what they found. The areas were not caused any growth or any improvements, and there was no advantage to the taxpayers. Why are you doing these TIDs? This money that you're putting there should be going into, and you can shake your head if you want, but I'll tell you what, we've got a problem here with your spending. And there have been no taxpayer meetings for what you're doing with these big projects. There have been no paper involved, no taxpayer involvement at all, no neighborhood group meetings, nothing. There's been nothing that you've had meetings for to involve the taxpayers. They have a right to have a say how their money is being spent, and that's not happening with this board. It's not happening. And any plan should not be planned out before there is taxpayer involvement and vetted through the people that you represent. And it should be vetted, even the businesses in the area should be part of the vetting so they know what's going on with their business. And the people you represent should have a say. And the people, you again are not to be developers. And it's unbelievable. I just can't believe what you're approving here with money. What you're going to do is put us in, again, you're going to put us into a tax mess that we're never going to get out of. None of the tax money that in these TIDs go into the general fund, and you don't have the right to mortgage our money. You do not have the right to spend millions of dollars without groups and neighborhood groups and taxpayer involvement. That is against the law. This is not a government by the board, for the board, and whatever. It's for the people. And you're not representing the people in your budget. And not only that, but I looked up something, and I will finish with this. This is just unreal what's happening here. The data comes from the Board of Governors that regulate our money, and they're based on two reports. It's called M1 and M2. And our government right now is ignoring what's going on. And M1 adds all the cash and coins in circulation and the deposits in checking accounts and savings deposits. And M2 includes that, and they also include institutional funds of what's available. What's happening right now, there are red flags in the system for the first time in 90 years. And it's never happened before. Only 4 times in the history of our economy has this happened. And after that, we had an economic collapse, okay? And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but people are not listening, and our government is not going for these reports because they don't want people to get upset. And 4 times in history when this happened, and those red flags are coming up right now, and the U.S. economy fell. And this is a sign that what you're doing right now is, please, you need to stop spending our money without our approval. The taxpayers last week complained they don't approve of all this spending. There's no need for it, and there's no need for a TID. These companies, they found that in these TIDs, these companies would spend the money anyway for improvements because that's what they're there for, without you spending our money to support them. That's their business when they come here. So again, I do a lot of research, and I was in a stock group many years ago with a bunch of older people. I picked the older group for one reason. They all owned big businesses. They were millionaires. And I learned a lot from meeting with them once a week, how they ran their businesses. And all their businesses were sold on retirement, and they're still in this state. And they were very conservative. And the taxpayers need to be involved, please. You have to have me and this other meeting that you passed to extend the TID. Nobody knew about that. You put it in, you buried it in another and put it in with a closed meeting. This is wrong. That's not what closed meetings are for, to decide how you're going to spend our money. That's for private things that you're working with. So we're going to try, I'm going to try, do what I can. I've got some serious issues coming up with my health, and I'm hoping that God will give me the strength to finish this out. But I'm going to start getting into with taxpayers to get to these meetings, to stop and ask you people to please stop what you're doing and take a conservative approach and say no. I've never heard anybody say no to anything that's passed on this board, other than a very simple thing, few easy things. And it's going to affect our economy. I can see it right now. The cost of food is unbelievable. Gas is getting ridiculous. And how can we afford, when you start raising our taxes? We can't do it. So we're asking for your help as taxpayers and to abide by the law. So thank you for letting me give my opinion.
And we do abide by the law. And if you're interested in the budget, there is a copy of it online that shows line for line as to what the different things are going to be. And as far as the TID is concerned, and the extension of the TID for the monies that are supporting the projects surrounding the TID and the infrastructure thereof, there were 4 meetings held on that. There was a TIF review board. There was a plan commission meeting. There was a public meeting here with the village board. And then there was another joint review board. So there were 4 meetings. All of them were posted. All of them were out there. It's not hiding, and none of it was discussed in a closed session. None of it. So that information is incorrect.
If we got it, well, then why don't they know? I asked 50 people, and I'm gonna start taking their names. When I go out and about, when I do my errands, I only have 2 hours a day that I can walk real quick. And they never heard of meetings. They don't, people are not aware until they're affected, and that's the problem. They are not aware and being made aware of more than.
Anyone else for citizen input or public appearance? Thank you.
Thank you.
It's on.
Yep.
Some of you look quite young, so you probably don't remember. My name's Patrick Doak, and I live at West 175, North 12960 Lancelot Drive. Some of you guys look very young and probably don't remember what happened to the northwest side of Milwaukee. Back in the early 70s, they built a shopping center there, restaurants, bars, followed, then condos started to move in, some high end, and it had the feel of like Disney World. And then at some point, not maybe in the early 80s, condo owners started to sell the property. Why they did, I don't know, but they didn't sell them, they rented them. They rented them to people that really didn't keep them up, didn't follow the basic codes and things like that. So it took 20 years, but that neighborhood, the northwest side of Milwaukee, descended into the most dangerous and unkept area in the city, and still is right now. You say, well, that can happen anywhere. And I say, well, it hasn't happened to Shorewood or Whitefish Bay or Brookfield. All those areas, I cannot find a bad area in any of those towns. And why? Because they thought they're forced to follow the codes. Everybody there follows the codes, and if they don't, they get written up and fined. We lived on the northwest side of Milwaukee for many years, and our neighborhood deteriorated too, very badly. The climax was when they intentionally drove a car through one of the houses that rental properties that they just built. So we decided we had to move out. We decided to maybe Germantown. Germantown probably is a good place that would, enforce the codes. But so please don't become a Milwaukee. I live next to a hoarding house property. For the past 3 years, we've been trying to get some help, some resolution to the hoarding issue, to no avail. It's very clear that the owners upon purchase weren't able to maintain the property, and the surviving owner still does absolutely nothing. It's a health hazard, a safety issue, not only to the homeowner, but to the whole neighborhood. All the residents within the neighborhood take pride in the upkeep of their homes and yards, and can only hope that their hard work pays off on the sale of their property. Many of us have lived in the area for 30 to 40 years. Lack of enforcement of the municipal code will not only lead to reduced home values within the immediate area, but will eventually snowball and affect the entire community like it did in Milwaukee. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward at this time for citizen input? You?
Carol Larson, Butternut Road. To start, I am for development, but I am not for development by this board. I do not agree with your purchase of the Grosnick property. You have to look internally at the village structure before you think about developing properties. That isn't your scope. You need to get the infrastructure of the village in place. Why wasn't that $1 million spent on getting us proper IT support, servers, technology, the planning resources, perhaps people that are equipped to do some of the higher tasks within an expanding village? It just doesn't make sense to me. So I would like to see a halt. I know that you have another closed session tonight to talk about purchasing other property. You guys are not developers. Stop with the purchasing, get the house in order. And I'd like to see the reopening of the 2050 plan, because when you only had about 120 voices or less providing input, that's less than half a percent of the population of Germantown. So that really isn't representing the true wishes of the community. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Does anyone else wishes to come forward at this time for citizen input?
Okay, this will be short. Melanie Smythe, N140W17938 Cedar Lane. To this lady Lynn over here, what happens with several people on this board and the staff is that they ignore residents. An example of that was in the 2050 plan, when the staff cherry-picked which comments they wanted to include as residents' input. And the end result is a very development-centric plan, which is incomplete. And it's incomplete because they did not complete neighborhood meetings as promised right when they passed the plan. At the time when it was passed, there were 3 neighborhoods that were supposed to have meetings with residents to discuss plans for their areas. But now it's gone up to 5. There's now 5 based on the things that have happened in the 2 years since the 2050 plan was, I think it's 2 years, since it was approved. And for that reason, any purchase of land, such as the Grosnick properties that was just mentioned, should be postponed until the village center meetings have been held and we have an actual plan for what needs to happen. I mean, it just makes sense. Why are you spending money, $1 million on property that nobody else has picked to develop over time? And we know that it's got contamination on it. So whatever happens to it, someone's going to have to spend more money on it. And $1 million, that's a lot of money. I'm also against the TID 7 and 8 extension, which was passed earlier this evening by the Joint Review Committee. And I'm specifically against the redo of the Rockfield Road in the section between Tower 4, or what will be Tower 4, and Goldendale. And part of the reason for that is it was already done 5 years ago, within the last 5 years. So that's a waste of money. And it's a perfect example of, since there is sewer and water already to that point or close to it, a developer can pay for that extension. Why are we adding that into the TID extension, where 50% of that money is going to have to be covered by more debt? So thus adding more debt service that has to be paid off for projects that could be covered by developers' costs. When the director of planning in a recent meeting said well, development's going to happen anyway. Well, so where's the but for this? There is no but for. You've got sewer and water already there. It can be connected to. Why are we subsidizing developers with our taxes? That's just wrong. Thank you.
It's not subsidized with your taxes. It's bonded for a TIF. No property taxes are used in that extension or in those TIFs. Those are all bonded and paid for by the companies that build there by their tax increment. It does not come from the village. It does not come from the residents. It comes from the buildings that are there to pay back the debt in order to put in the infrastructure.
Yes.
That's what it does.
We don't get those taxes for the years
That
the
TIF will
builder is
close in
open.
10 years. Can you tell me another TIF that's closed in 10 years?
Okay, so
Do
for
you
10
have an
years,
example
we
of
don't get
another
those
TIF
taxes.
that's closed in
We
10
don't get
years?
those taxes, and then it's a measly 1.6 for the village's part when you close 6, 7, and 8. That doesn't seem like a lot for 380 million assessed value, which is what the administrator told
I
us in
don't cut the
January.
percentages. That's directed by somebody else in the property tax split. We get what we get, but it's still a development that is not paid for by the residents. And that is misinformation on your part to say that it's paid for by taxes.
We are
It is
missing
not
out
paid for by
on working with
taxes.
you in those years that the TID is open.
You said that it was paid for by residents' taxes. It is not.
You don't get those taxes. You don't get those taxes. It would have happened.
Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward for citizen input at this time? Anyone else? Is there anyone else online? All right, thank you. Next item then is consent agenda. Motion to be in order.
Motion to approve consent agenda. All of them.
A through F. Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve consent agenda items A through F. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Trustee Jan Miller.
Thank you. I'd like to pull item C as in Charlie and E as in Edward, please.
Further discussion on the motion to approve? Trustee Pieper.
The pulling of the consent agenda, questions should be asked before I'm just going off of history, but Trustee Miller, all of the questions that you ask were already previously answered the majority of the time. And if you have questions on the consent agenda, they should be asked ahead of time.
Or learned at the committees. Further discussion on a motion to approve consent agenda items A, B, D, and F. No further discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Warren,
Aye.
Trustee Ketz,
No.
Trustee Bum,
Aye.
Trustee Jay Miller,
Aye.
Trustee Hudson,
Aye.
Trustee Pieper. Aye. Trustee Rick Miller,
Aye.
Village President Walter.
Aye.
Motion passes. Consent agenda item C. Trustee Miller.
Yes. Thank you. So, we are, provided some initial pricing, but why was this not, put in as a, I would say, as a extension, or what do you call it, a buffer? Usually
Contingency on the
there's like a
project?
5% or 10%.
Contingency?
Yes, thank you.
Well, I can't answer that question.
Oh, yeah.
I can tell you a little bit about why we got to this point.
Okay.
The tower project was scoped out several years ago, and it was initially planned to take place at that time. Now a couple of years have transpired where there hasn't been activity on the tower project for a number of different reasons. But construction is resuming. And the change order is for containment for paint overspray to protect nearby facilities that didn't exist at the time.
So does this change order include all of the cost it would take to get the rust off, then paint it, and then put it back up?
This
Or
is
it was
just,
never up?
no, the original contract has all that covered. This change order covers the containment, like whatever protection methods they're going to use to enclose the tower while they're painting, so the overspray doesn't blow out and hit nearby facilities or vehicles or whatever the case might be.
So are you saying that the painting actually happens when it's on the ground?
No.
Oh, it's just the removal of rust? I'm not sure.
No. Yeah, this
It's a
is,
new
this is
tower.
the new tower that's being constructed. So the change order is just to put protection in place. So when they're painting, it doesn't spray out over
Oh,
the facilities
okay.
that didn't exist a couple of years ago.
Okay. A tarp, okay. Thank you. Thanks for explaining.
Make a motion to approve item C as presented.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on a motion to approve? No discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Warren,
Aye.
trustee Cutts, trustee Baum,
Aye.
trustee Jay Miller,
Aye.
trustee Hudson,
Aye.
trustee Peeper, trustee Rick Miller,
Aye.
and village president Walter.
Aye. Consent agenda item E, trustee Jan Miller.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Why, this truck is, being bid out and we get one for $327,964. This was in the budget for 2024,
Correct.
the regular budget?
The utility budget.
Okay. And will it be delivered this year yet?
I don't have the delivery date in front of me, but I would believe so, just based on how we're buying it. This is a demo truck that we're buying at a discounted rate. So it stands to reason that it would be available when we were ready.
It's just a lot of money.
This is part of capital.
These questions.
Point of order.
These questions.
Point of
have
order. I'm
been
not
answered
talking, I'm
already.
asking. Thank you.
Capital. Okay, that's from.
Thank you.
It's not part of the general fund and it's not part of the capital borrowing. It's part of the sewer utility or sewer and water utility capital borrowing.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Make a motion to approve item E as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Who, trustee Warren or trustee Peeper?
Doesn't matter.
Any discussion on a motion to approve? Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Warren,
Aye.
trustee Cutts,
Aye.
trustee Baum,
Aye.
trustee Jan Miller,
Aye.
trustee Hudson,
Aye.
trustee Peeper,
Aye.
trustee Rick Miller,
Aye.
village president Walter.
Aye. Next item on the agenda is unfinished business, starting with unfinished business item A, Country Bell Manor Road and Grading History Discussion. Public Works Director.
All right, so I wanted to just have a little bit of discussion before we moved into the next item, which is the vote to approve. So a little bit of background on the Country Bell Manor development, and then some discussion about slopes and about driveway approaches and how those are addressed. Because I see those as the two primary issues that were brought up by the resident in the last meeting. So subdivision development is put together with a couple different standards. The Village of Germantown at the time, and this is 2008, 2009, had a document called Standards and Specifications. It was kind of the precursor to what we call the Development Handbook nowadays. And that's sort of a guidebook for developers to build subdivisions, including utilities and things like grading to our specifications. In addition to that, something that will guide this conversation a little bit is the driveway permit and the application that folks use in order to connect to a road. At the time of this development, the driveway permit did not allow concrete within the right-of-way. Subsequently, over the years now, because that's been 14, 15 years, we have eased that restriction to allow concrete within the right-of-way, but only to be installed at the owner's risk, where if the village has to come in and do maintenance work of any type or road work, that they could lose that within the right-of-way. So like I mentioned, the standards nowadays are the Germantown Development Handbook and the revision to the driveway permit that we did back in 2023. So just going over how the roads were installed in this subdivision, the base course of asphalt was installed around that 2008, 2009 timeframe. But the top course of asphalt, so the base course is about 3 inches in depth and the top course would have been about 2 inches, but that top course was never installed. And over the course of the 12 or 14 years or so, homeowners eventually connected their driveway to that base course. Some of that connection was done with a permit, some was not permitted. Now over that same amount of time, the roads deteriorated, and this probably deteriorated a little faster just because it didn't have the full depth of asphalt. But in 2022, the road was identified and became part of our road program. So it was originally slated to be reconstructed in 2024. However, in 2023, they had some additional funding and were able to pull that subdivision forward. So the road was actually completed in 2023. Want to talk just briefly about the method that was used for the reconstruction. This was a pulverize and reconstruct. So what that means is that the 3 inches of base course asphalt that were originally installed were pulverized and compacted, and then 4 inches of asphalt in 2 lifts was laid over the top. Typical for this type of project would be to put 5 inches of asphalt down, at least in Germantown, for our development handbook. But I think the 4 inches acknowledges that folks that were making decisions last year and in prior years identified that 5 inches and even 4 inches, because of the method they selected, the pulverize and reconstruct, would raise the profile of that road just a little bit. Now, when you think about other options that would have been available to them, pulverize and reconstruct, although, you know, there's certainly drawbacks, and we're talking about what those drawbacks are today, it still is probably the best choice. The most common approach that we take for this type of reconstruction is just to do a mill and overlay, where we take out 2 inches of asphalt and put it back. But because this was done with just 3 inches and didn't have the full depth of asphalt like our roads normally would, it probably wouldn't have been stable enough. So that's probably, and this is just my speculation, probably why they didn't choose mill and overlay. Another possibility could have just been to pave over the base course that was existing. But there were signs that that road was deteriorating, and there's pictures, I think even in one of the packets that was sent over, that show some pretty significant cracking and even some grass growing up through some of those cracks, which could indicate that there were problems with the base. So if there are problems with the base, this pulverize and reconstruct is actually a decent approach because it adds base material to the road. So moving on here. Now, getting into driveway connections and how that works, the road program every year replaces driveway aprons in the right-of-way. Replacements are always done in asphalt, and that's regardless of, you know, whether they are originally asphalt or they were concrete. We always replace with asphalt. Method of replacement does vary, but I would say the standard probably is that a joint is saw cut at some, you know, depth into the driveway, and then it's paved up to that joint. In this case, there was a field decision made to actually mill off concrete from a portion of the driveway and overlay asphalt on the concrete. And the point there is that all driveways are different. So this isn't like a planned out, fully engineered road reconstruction. It's based on a lot of field decisions that have to be made. And there's a lot of variations in driveways. There's variations in widths of the road, and especially in a cul-de-sac, how far, what are the limits of where we're paving? That's stuff that's all kind of identified in the field with the contractor and with the village inspector. So the type of decision that was made at Country Bell Manor regarding like milling of the concrete and overlaying asphalt, well, it's probably not the most standard approach. It's one that the folks making the decisions at that time felt was appropriate. Another issue is just how far into the driveway we go with the removal and then paving back with asphalt. That's really just determined by the new profile of the road. And in this case, it was a little higher. So they had to go further into the driveway to provide the smooth transition from the road surface to the driveway. So these are just photos of Mr. Dempsey's driveway after reconstruction, and you can see some of the conditions that I was talking about. All right, and then moving on to grading. The standard for subdivision grading was that document that I mentioned at the beginning, the Germantown standards and specifications. As best we can tell, it identified a 3-to-1 slope requirement. It is a little difficult. There isn't like great version control, so I can't go back and pinpoint the exact version of this document that was used at that time. But we feel pretty confident in saying that it identified a 3-to-1 slope for ditches and slopes off of roads. And from what we've surveyed, and I'll get into that in a minute, the slopes generally conform to that 3-to-1 standard. Nowadays with our development handbook, we've actually asked for flatter slopes, so it's more like 4-to-1 that we require, but back at the time of this development, it was 3-to-1. The grading plan showed something probably a little less steep, but actual construction that we verified here with this survey showed that we were right around that 3-to-1 range. So we went out a couple weeks ago and took measurements, cross sections of these locations. So Mr. Dempsey's house is kind of on the left end of this photo in the cul-de-sac. And if you look at cross section A, when we go to the next slide, that will be on the right-hand side, and then the end of the ditch into the property is on the left-hand side. So you can see here, the measurements that were taken are generally, again, falling in that 3-to-1 range. Where there's some minor variations are in cross sections like A, B, and maybe even a little bit of C. So kind of towards that end, the right end of the photo here, where if you look right at the top, and I can't really point very well with this thing or at all. Can I? There we go. So yeah, right where Brian is pointing, there's just a little bit of an anomaly where if you measured over that distance, it is steeper, and you can go out there and observe the condition. I think a number of you have. And the same kind of holds true with A, where there's that section basically right where the road ends and the shoulder moves into the ditch, that it probably is steeper than 3-to-1 over that couple feet. But again, if you measure it out from the bottom of the ditch to the top of the road, you're about right in that 3-to-1 range. So I think I kind of talked about all these findings, but I'd be happy to answer any other questions that could help with the discussion.
Trustee Bone?
Please. Section D, the right-hand side of that, Is that a 3-to-1 slope? That one looks like a 45-degree angle to me. Or
That
is it,
one-
is it your engineering scale where you compress or stretch things that I'm accustomed to?
Yeah, that one is definitely a little steeper. It's real close to the 3-to-1. It's probably 2.5, 3. So it is probably a little steeper right there. And if you're out there just visually looking at this, you can see how kind of the steepness at the road is worse kind of to the, I guess it would be the west side. And then gradually gets better going towards the Dempsey household. So in that area where cross-section D was taken, it's probably kind of in that transition area.
Thank you.
Trustee Peeper.
So I met with the neighbors, several of them in the subdivision, and heard their comments and everything. There were a couple concerns that I had. The first one is like, there's no uniformity in the subdivision. Some driveways were ripped up 2 feet, some were ripped up over 6 feet. And every driveway is different, which I understand every driveway is different and asphalt had to be laid differently, but it gives this subdivision, for better words, a lack of uniformity look. And these are not cheap houses. So that was one concern of mine, was the non-uniformity. But then also, when I walked throughout the whole subdivision, I noticed that the driveways that had more than 3 feet ripped up, that there were already cracks, where the driveway previously came to. You can see that there's a whole lot of cracking going on there because it looks like it's not even pitched correctly, connecting the driveway to the street. And this was laid not even a year ago. So having a road that less than a year old has all those cracks is another concern for me. And then also, Parkland Circle was done the same exact time as this subdivision. Parkland Circle, not one of the driveways did we extend the asphalt up their concrete driveways, not one of them. And one more thing, why would we approve a driveway permit for some of these residents in the subdivision to lay a brand new concrete driveway? And then a couple months later, we ripped up several feet of their driveway.
Well, just about that last question, the 2023 permit does state that it was revised, I think, in November or December of 2023. And it does state that if you do install a concrete driveway, that it's at your own risk for this very reason. Now, the timing is another thing that I've heard people discuss, and this was, I guess, originally identified in the road program in 2022. It was planned for 2024 and then pulled forward to 2023. So I think there's probably aspects of the communication that could have improved. But
Yeah, I'm just struggling. Why would we approve this permit for this homeowner to pour their driveway to, right here, and then we had planned to rip up several feet of it? Why didn't we communicate that to them?
yeah, that's before I was here, so I can't answer
Yeah, I
specifically
know. I
on
know
that,
you
but-
kind of picked this up, so I do feel bad for you, but
But yeah, I would think that ideally, if somebody is coming in for a permit and we know that the road is going to be reconstructed, that we would tell them, see it on the
Concrete is not
application that
cheap.
it's concrete and say, oh, you might want to, think about that twice because we're doing the road. It could have just been a timing thing where we didn't know yet that road was going to be done in 2023 and we processed the permit beforehand.
So then what about the Parkland Circle? How that is just drastically different than this subdivision?
It's just going back to the same thing, that it really depends on the profile of the road. And if they matched in pretty close to what the existing profile was in that neighborhood. They probably didn't have to go very far into the driveway, but we did raise the profile of this road in Country Bell Manor, or those roads in Country Bell Manor, by several inches.
So I'm just I'm not an engineer like you, but it would make more sense to me to have the road ripped up completely, since it was pretty bad and in disrepair. It wasn't laid, it was just a few inches of asphalt rather than being thick. Why didn't we just rip it up and haul it out and do it just like they did in Parkland?
That could have been another consideration, but I'm guessing the cost was the driving factor there, and that would have been substantially more expensive.
And that's a shame, because I know that all of those neighbors would have rather waited to have their road repaved if it was ripped up and hauled away and not lose their driveways. Done.
Trustee Warren?
Thank you. Just start off with a couple of engineering things. So, Matt, you talked about most of it was constructed to the 3-to-1, except near the edge of the road where it's steeper. Don't you agree that that's the most critical area near the edge of the road, where cars may go a little off the shoulder and catch that steeper side slope? You never know, could roll it over with the wrong maneuver, or somebody getting out of the car could fall down that slope. So would you agree that the most critical point of that side slope is right by the shoulder near the road?
Sure. Yes.
And that's where we see in 3 of the sections that we exceed our 3-to-1 standard,
Right.
if I understood that correctly.
That's correct.
Okay. In regard to the non-uniformity, that's pretty typical on all road jobs, because every driveway is unique. The grades coming in at that point are unique, and match points and techniques for blending in will vary at each driveway. And it's a in-field decision. I've been out there a couple times, met with Mr. Dempsey twice, looked at it pretty closely. I feel that the decisions that were made out in the field were correct. I probably would have made the same decisions based on what I saw. The concerns I had was I just couldn't believe it was 15 years before this road was back on the radar screen. I guess I can't blame the residents for assuming that this is the finished surface grade and matched into that grade, whether they had permits or not. So that timeline was a little concerning. I think we dropped the ball internally, but we were going through some struggles as far as staffing at technical levels and administrative levels. So that kind of complicated things. We didn't have the most experienced staff out there, young, inexperienced technicians, but it's the best we had at the time. I think all of that taken into account, that's basically the price we pay for staffing changes, and it was pretty much a perfect storm with what happened out there. I think when we get to a point in the motion, I personally would recommend 100% reimbursement to these property owners. Thank you.
Other questions? Trustee Bieber?
No, I'm with Trustee Warren on this one. I know this is we could open up a big can of worms by doing this, but I will always listen to the residents, and I do believe that the village was in the wrong on this, and I think they should be compensated 100% to get their driveways back. And just a question for you, Trustee Warren, where else in the subdivision have you seen the lack of uniformity where the driveways were done like this? Because I do not recall, I don't recall seeing any subdivision that was done like this. And Parkland was done at the same time, and not one of those driveways did the asphalt go over there, or did they rip up the concrete and pour asphalt?
When I refer to uniformity, I mean that each driveway has its own little nuances as far as how far up into the driveway is the match point. It's all dependent on the grades. You want a nice smooth transition. So when I talk about uniformity, you could look at his neighbor's driveway and it's not going to look exactly the same in that regard. As far as the technique, as far as milling out that concrete, so you create a butt joint and then bring in the asphalt to that, that's a common technique that's used.
Yeah, and I'm just not sure what went wrong then and why all the cracking with all the new asphalt that was laid.
Well,
because
that's-
If you look, you can tell that the
Right.
pitch, several of the pitches do not match the driveway.
In regards to the cracking, what you're seeing is reflective cracking. Those are the joints, the concrete joints that are underneath that asphalt now, and they're always going to reflect through. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to fail or it was put in bad, but it's the nature of the beast. Anytime you're overlaying a concrete surface, your joints are going to reflect through.
So since this is just discussion, do we move on and vote at the next item on the agenda? Okay.
Is there any other questions? No other questions? Thank you, Matt. Next item then is under unfinished business, item B, approval of Country Bell Manor driveway adjustment at 50% contribution. Trustee Hudson.
Make the motion to approve Countryville Manor driveway adjustment at 100% contribution.
I'll second that. Oh, it surprised me there.
Made and seconded, discussion. Trustee Hudson.
The challenge that I see with this is not the engineering. It has nothing to do with anything that's been shown. We are where we are today with this because, again, we completely failed on communication. If we would have given these residents enough notice to work with the village and talk to us and come up with a solution, we still may be at the solution that we are today, but at least we would have had a buy-in from our residents. And in speaking with the residents and in going out there, so first of all, it is a drop dead gorgeous subdivision. I have to admit that. But again, this is one of those projects where we did not give our residents enough time to give any type of input. I think we gave them 1 day notice. And I heard a phrase that makes me a little uncomfortable, is that there were some field decisions made. And I do understand the need for some field decisions, but I have to wonder if we would have been working with our residents, if we wouldn't be sitting here tonight avoiding this entire issue. And that's why I think we owe it at 100% level, not 50% level, because in this case, I believe that we or our vendor could have done a little bit better than supplying a 24-hour notice to get a new road. Thank you.
Further discussion. Trustee Pieper.
Just to piggyback on what trustee Hudson said, in speaking to the residents in this neighborhood, they did try to stop the workers. Right after the road was ripped up, they tried stopping them several times. They tried communicating with the workers. They tried communicating with the village, multiple phone calls, emails, and the work just went ahead anyway. It is a shame, and I completely support giving them 100%. Concrete's not cheap. They paid for these driveways to make them look beautiful. Some people's brick pavers were ripped up. I agree 100%.
Further discussion. Trustee Rick Miller.
Yeah, I can see that this is gonna go at 100%. Where are the potential funding sources?
So the funding source would be out of Sears Road Program. And another thing that I want to bring up, just so you're fully aware of all the issues before voting on it, is that After, after this happened, it came up for discussion in the Public Works Committee. It wasn't a voted upon item, but the committee generally agreed to a 50-50 share, and staff acted on that discussion and sent out letters to the 12 or 13 residents that were affected in that subdivision, asking them to opt into a 50-50 cost share program. We got responses from 6 of those. So we were proceeding, planning to replace 6 driveways at 50%. If there's 100%, that could probably affect the number of residents that opted in, because now it's 100% versus 50, no cost to them.
So how many driveways or how many houses
Up
are?
to 13, that would be every home. 6, when we sent out that letter, replied and opted into that 50-50 cost share.
And some are matched okay, or at least satisfactorily
Satisfied
to some of
enough
the
without, yeah,
residents?
without wanting to invest their own funding or whatever.
Okay.
Trustee Chan Miller.
So I'm in agreement with 100%, but I must ask the question. So if you only do, let's just say, half of the driveways, how are you going to achieve that without getting, and I'm not an engineer, moving the road down a little bit? So if it's every other driveway, how do you even things out?
You would just, I mean, it wouldn't be that difficult. You would just pour the concrete up to, the approximate limits of the road, the end of the right of way.
So you would do
So
the
you
concrete.
you would remove the concrete that was overlaid and the asphalt, create that butt joint that Trustee Warren was talking about.
Okay.
And fill the concrete between the road and that joint. It's also worth mentioning that there's probably going to be varying levels of satisfaction with the concrete too, because the joints aren't going to appear identical. The color isn't going to appear identical because those driveways are a couple years old. We're doing new concrete. The mixes could be slightly different. So those are all things that we should be aware of.
President.
Yeah.
If I
Administrator.
If I could also just ask for one other point of clarification from the board. There are different levels of design in the concrete driveway aprons. Some had some imprinted concrete. Some had more, lines put in. Others were more vanilla driveway aprons. Is it the intent of the board to, there was, and then when we had this discussion at the Public Works Committee, there was, if I recall correctly, the direction was to pay for the replacement of the driveway with basically a vanilla concrete apron. And the residents, if they wanted some more design or something a little bit more ornate, that they would pay that incremental cost. So there, I guess the question for the board is, what is the direction that you have for staff on what you would like replaced?
Trustee Pieper.
Is it possible to communicate with these residents who actually do want their driveways replaced? Is it possible to communicate them and come back to the board with the cost of, the additional stamping or whatever special fancy aprons or?
That's possible. This work was bid out on a per driveway basis in the 2024 road program. So the way that it was bid didn't include this stuff. So we would have to go through some sort of
Sure.
change order process in order to, get those additional
Or
services.
are you familiar with the 13 houses to the point where you can give me a quantity of how many have additional aproning or stamping?
I'm not that familiar with it. No.
Okay. So I can't say for the first who made the motion, but as for the second, my opinion would be to approve it at 100% as it is right now. But if there are additional costs, to bring it back to the board of what those additional costs are before the work is performed, and be in communication with the neighbors to see if they want that decorative concrete still, if they're fine with, okay. I mean, I feel like we have to communicate more with the neighbors.
I mean, what I would say is my perception, I don't want to speak for the residents, but just from the conversations that we've had with several of them, not all of them, but that, you know, they have put a lot into the homes. It is a beautiful subdivision, and they're probably going to want the driveways as close to matching the remainder of the driveways as is possible. And there would be some additional cost to doing that.
And I understand that, because who's going to want a beautiful decorative driveway and then the last several feet of it not match?
Right.
That'd be pointless. So I think we do need to communicate with the neighbors. We need, how many of these driveways have decorative features? What is the cost for however many driveways? What different features? If there's 13 driveways, I mean, could staff please provide for the board how many houses have decorative? You know, you would know what I'm asking for, right? Yeah. Is that possible?
Sure. It will affect the timing. So I mean,
Sure.
from what I understand from the residents, they're not necessarily in a
Yeah.
hurry. They just want it done right. And
And
I've heard
for
them say
those that of you that are here from that subdivision, would that be okay? I mean, obviously the board is, I can't speak for everybody else who hasn't spoken yet if they're on board with the 100%. Obviously, we want your driveways. We want to make you happy with this. Why are we going to do this and just mess it up again? So can we wait for a little more information? Okay. You guys are in no rush, right? Okay.
Further discussion, trustee Warren.
Yes, the residents have been very patient with this. You know, that's an interesting point. We never talked about in our meetings, and that the special treatments or surface treatments or the window painting. And that adds, now it gets pretty pricey when you start doing that. It could be a different contractor now that's needed. It's an extra step, so just be prepared. It's going to be more expensive if we get into these special treatments. And I suppose we know where they are because you assume the approach had the same treatment as the rest of the driveway, I guess. That's probably how I do it. The elephant in the room, though, is we sent a letter out saying 50-50 participation. 6 people signed up for it. Now, if we agree or pass 100%, do the rest of these people have a chance to say, hey, 50%, I'm not in, 100%, I'm in now? Are we going to listen or acknowledge that or bring them on board? I mean, we'll have to figure out how we want to work through that also. Thank you.
Trustee Hudson.
So for me, this is not an issue that I had to give a lot of thought of. So this is one of those issues to me that comes down, are we going to do what's right or are we not going to do what's right? And to me, what is right is it's not a lot of, it's not a complex thought, right? So we as a village could have done a better job, and we dropped the ball. And I think we owe it to our citizens to, I hesitate to use the word happy because I don't think we can do that, but I do think that we can do what's right. And what is right is to offer the same deal to everybody. And if they want to opt in, they want to opt in. Thank you.
Trustee Peeper.
I'd like to make amendment to the motion to include any decorative or additional features of these driveways. So that their driveway is put back as much as possible how it was before we ripped it up.
That's your motion?
That is my motion.
Motion requires a second.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. How do you foresee going forward now that you've set this precedent for all future road work?
I understand that, but it was our fault. It
The,
was our fault. We dropped the ball with the developer.
We're
If
setting
we
a
did not,
precedent.
yeah, I understand that, but when we're wrong, we're wrong. We were in the wrong.
With the understanding of when you're building a home and you choose for your own purpose to put in a decorative driveway with the knowing that if the village comes through and has to do any repair work or sewer and water work, that the agreement is we put it back in an asphalt. That's the agreement. Been out there and it's been communicated. Now you're changing and making a precedent that you will replace it as it stands before, even if they put in pavers at 100% for everybody going forward.
No, not
You are
everybody going
A
forward.
little free with all residents' money to
No.
pay for 13.
Not everyone going forward. There are 13
There's no
houses.
Precedent.
There are 13 houses.
What about
That
the
is not
next road
setting a
that we come
precedence.
across?
It said we dropped the ball with the developer. If we did not we didn't have our ducks in a row and we dropped the ball with the developer. He should have paid for this. It was our fault that we couldn't get him to because we didn't file our paperwork. We weren't on top of it. We dropped the ball.
It doesn't.
So we wouldn't
This-
have even had to pay for this street if
It's the fact
we,
that The agreement's been that any replacement of road would be replaced back in asphalt.
and this is an exception because
So it's a
we were
precedent.
in the
It's a
fault.
precedent.
I disagree with you.
Trustee Hudson.
if you'll allow me, I'd like to answer your question. So the answer to the question is proper communication, right? If we would have had proper communication, we could have wound up with those driveways looking exactly like they do today, but our residents would have known that going in. And to me, this whole thing is we didn't communicate and we didn't give them a chance to have their voices heard. And I think that's our village's goal, right? Is to build better communication among our residents. So I understand what you're saying about setting a precedent, but we should be giving our citizens less than a one-day notice that we're going to rip up their streets and their driveways. And we should allow them to be able to ask questions about that process. And that's why I feel the way I do.
This is further discussion on a motion to amend. Trustee Jan Miller.
I agree that communication and transparency are the most important things. Matt, you're just picking this up. This is pre you. So it's not about you. It's about going forward. We need to communicate better with people and when we're going to do the roads, how we're going to communicate with them. If the project gets postponed, get them another letter, get a phone call out, send an email. We should have a database. These are all pretty simple things, communication. If we don't have that kind of communication available now, then that's something that we should be working on, and whether it's a driveway or a tree, we need to communicate a little bit better. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to amend. Trustee Rick Miller.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna say anything, but now I am. I'm gonna be a descending vote. This to me is kind of like the mailboxes where we replace a mailbox at a standard level. We don't replace mailboxes at a highly decorative level. So I can't support that. And honestly, I was gonna descend on the other one too, because I agreed to the 50%. I won't agree to the 100%. So that's my opinion. I mean, it's been code. It's been that way for a long time. If you go around the other subdivisions that were were repaved last year, Concord, Water Street and all those. They were done the same exact way. They slope down into the driveway, they match. And they matched as best as possible. They're not uniform, they're never gonna be uniform. Some are concrete, some are paved. And that's, that's was our precedence and that was, I believe, our code. I don't know if I'm using the right word, but that's how we've said that anything on a right of way is gonna be replaced with pavement.
Further discussion on a motion to amend? No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those against?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion passes. Further discussion on the motion as amended. I have a question. So we've always heard in the past from other engineers that used to be on the board that crush and overlay was what we should do with most of our roads when we replaced them, that we were spending too much money on full replacements and taking it down to the base grade and then repairing. It seems in this instance that crush and overlay was probably an inexpensive way to replace this road, but was it the best way? Being that it raised the profile of the road, and do they, going forward, as we look at other roads and opportunities of what's the best way to replace that road, does crush and overlay need to be examined a little bit closer where maybe it needs to be compacted or scraped down to the original profile? I mean, what's your thought there?
I think you can argue that it's one of the best options that was available. What was different with this one is the unusual set of circumstances that got the neighborhood to that point. But I mentioned briefly, mill and overlay is probably the next most, or maybe even the most common technique that we use. But we couldn't mill because there was only 3 inches of asphalt down, and then there wouldn't have been enough base to hold the new pavement. It would have essentially been the same condition that existed from day one. And then a full replacement where you're removing all the materials and putting back new, that's more expensive and would shorten the amount of road that you're able to address with the road program. So we try to pick the right set of circumstances for the right type of reconstruction. We do that analysis.
It also seems that when we do a fair amount of road repair, where we tend to get in most of the issues that bring people forward is when we have to do any type of reditching. We've seen it on where your in-laws live.
Forest Drive.
Forest Drive. We've seen it in Happy Hollow. And anytime that we have to go back and fix ditches, it always seems to garner more concerns from the residents that it's not what they're used to or not what was ever there before. Is it always necessary to go and reditch when you're doing a road of this concern, or was this one just necessary based on its age?
We really didn't go into the ditches with this one. And like looking ahead to this year's program, there's just a really small amount of ditch work compared to the total length of road that we're replacing, but we are taking some of the additional steps in communication that hadn't been taken previously.
I know that's a forte of since you've been on board is communication. So for that, I appreciate. Further discussion on the motion as amended. No further discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Warren,
Aye.
trustee Cutts,
Aye.
trustee Baum,
Nay.
trustee Jane Miller,
Aye.
trustee Hudson.
Aye.
Trustee Peeper. Aye. Trustee Rick Miller,
Nay.
village president Walter.
Motion passes 5-3. Next item is new business, starting with new business item A, informational report on enforcement actions at W175 North 12890 Lancelot Drive. Village administrator.
Thank you, and I can start out, and the village attorney may want to provide some additional information as well. Actually, on Friday, I believe it was Friday morning, we received, and I put in the packet, a letter and a petition that was signed by a number of residents in the area of Lancelot Drive. And it relates to some issues on a property on Lancelot Drive where there is some property problems, trash, junk, things of that nature in the yard that are both an eyesore and, causing, potential insect, mosquito type problems, things along those lines. The residents asked that it be placed on the agenda so that they could have an update in a public forum, and the board could get an update as well. I did speak with one of the residents on Friday to give him an update, and we can provide that here for the entire group. The village staff are aware of the issue, and we have been working on that for the past 6 months or so. We have been had meetings with the police department, the community development department, the village attorney, and trying to work through the process. There are limitations and restrictions on what the village can do on private property, and legal processes that we have to follow before we can go on to resolve the types of problems that this particular property has. The village attorney has been working with community development on moving that process forward. We have a packet of evidence of data that's been assembled and is ready for filing with the municipal court. The village attorney can provide an update on the status of that. And once that goes to the municipal court, then it'll start the legal proceedings that eventually will allow us to go onto the property and clean things up. We're trying to move that along as quickly as we can, but I know members of the board are familiar with this from other properties where this comes up from time to time. There are a lot of protections in place for the property owners and restrictions that are placed on local government from what we're able to do on private property, and we have to go through those processes. And unfortunately, they are time consuming and pretty rigorous. So I guess I'd ask if the village attorney has anything else specific on this.
Sure. Just one correction, which is that we're not dealing with the municipal court. Municipal court basically is just citations that would be issued to the owner. That doesn't give us the right to do anything. It would just impose a monetary penalty upon the property owner. We instead are looking to file with the circuit court as part of that. Part of the requirements that we need to go through is we have to notify everybody who's appropriately involved. There was, as a result, we pulled title, got a title report on the property. There was a name on it that was not somebody that we were anticipating. So we're vetting that and trying to figure out how they fit in. Actually, based on some information that I got today, we believe that this individual is deceased, and that will create a few more potential headaches in terms of how we deal with it, but nothing that we can't overcome. So the process is, as the administrator says, underway. It does take time. In fact, by statute, there's a 60-day period within which the property owner, after getting certain notice, has to basically clean it up on their own, or at least start to make progress on their own. And if they do that, then obviously there's no need for the filing and that kind of stuff. So the process is underway, as I say, but it does, unfortunately, by statute, just take some time. So,
Trustee Bone.
Can you give these people some kind of expectation of what level of correction there is going to be when this is done? Is this going to be basically a brand new house that looks as beautiful as theirs? Or is it still going to be trashy but the violations will be gone?
Probably closer to the latter, which is to say that based on inspections that were done by staff, the issues that were identified centered around the junk and debris. There's some unlicensed vehicles that are in the yard, those types of things. They did not identify any sort of structural issues with the house itself, and we. Yeah, as a result, would expect that the debris and the junk outside would be cleaned up. Additionally, we don't have particular, there's no code provision against hoarding, if you will, accumulating junk within your own house. Obviously, at some point, that activity reaches a level where it becomes a health hazard to the residents within the home and potentially could be actionable, although that's not something we get involved in. That's a health department issue. So that's the Ozaki, Washington County Health Department gets involved in that. They are aware of the circumstances here and basically concur at this point that this is not something that they would be involved in. So yes, we expect that the property itself on the outside will be cleaned up and look more presentable, but it's not going to be perfect.
I have one of these houses down the street from me. Been that way for 20 years. They gave the orders to clean it up. Just enough to get past the violations.
This isn't the first time that this house has been asked to be cleaned up on the outside, is it? There was a previous time where the family got involved and helped to get rid of some things.
That is my understanding that there was a prior instance where there was some accumulation that was corrected. My understanding is that the family is not at this point interested in continuing to help. It sounds like the family that was involved was really the family of the, I think, husband who passed away a couple years ago, 2 years ago, I think it was. And I don't think that they have a whole lot of interest in helping out mom.
Are there other groups within the county that could get involved to help clean up the outside?
There,
Groups or volunteer groups?
nothing specifically that I'm aware of to do that. Certainly in other instances, we've seen church groups, where the individual is a member of a church, for example, that they might get involved and help out. There are some programs through the county that they can go and apply for the assistance, which we've typically tried to direct people to when they get into that position. But it's something that they would need to actively do on their own. It's not something we can do. Typically, for example, there was one that we dealt with not here in Germantown, but another community where through the state they were able to get a loan to take care of some of the issues. There were more structural issues in that particular one than we have here. But obviously, in order to get that loan, they needed a mortgage that was on the property. That's not something we can force on somebody. But they were able to take out basically a no interest loan to make the repairs and do the things that they needed to do. So there are some things, and obviously a lot of that comes through the health department for these types of things, but it's really limited to circumstances where they reach out for the help themselves.
So I'm gonna make an assumption that this lady is a elderly.
Yes.
Lives there?
Yes.
And is obviously cannot take care of the house that she's in, let alone probably take care of herself. If for my own circumstances, if like a relative has to go into the hospital that's elderly and they live alone, they usually can't go back to their home until they can prove certain conditions of being able to take care of themselves. Is this a situation where this person just isn't able to do that?
I don't want to say could be because again, that's a health department determination, and at least at this point, the health department is satisfied that she has the faculties to take care of what she needs to do. She just at this point has chosen not to.
So somehow or other, is there ways for us to write any type of ordinances that helps control this in a tighter frame?
No, as I say, the timeframes that we're looking at are really statutory, state-based, and we don't have the ability to deviate from that. We could certainly give longer time, but generally that's not something that we want to do. But we would not be able to shorten that time period because we would run afoul of constitutional issues at that point.
Trustee Jan Miller.
This is very sad. Is in your letter, or in their letter to us, it said that Mr. Benner passed away, and it was 8 days before they reported it. That's some.
A little bit private details, Trustee Miller.
It's in the agenda.
Okay.
Just.
It doesn't all need to be fleshed out. Yes, he was actually found by our paramedics.
Oh, okay. My point is this, it doesn't say what year this happened or anything like that, but is there anything that we can do as far as getting Washington County, either social services or the Department of Aging to make a call? Or if they need some sort of family member, couldn't the family that doesn't want to help clean it up at least have her evaluated?
Yeah, again, I mean, the county departments, health department and aging department are aware of the circumstances and what's going on here. Obviously, they were informed, back when Mr. Died in the home, and were advised at that point of what was going on. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of programs to help folks that just have what is likely just a mental illness. It's not something that it's a pure, clear harm to themselves or to others. It's just a mental illness that creates problems, and these are the hardest situations to deal with. If she was, in a position where she was letting the home go and she had no working toilets and food that was spoiled in the fridge and all that kind of stuff, that's a different story, but she doesn't have that based on the last inspections that had been done. And so, the county and the village just don't have a lot of tools to address that circumstance.
How long ago was that?
I don't know for sure when the last time the county was in. Obviously, they get involved and don't necessarily involve us, but we've been in contact with them a couple times over the last couple years, and every time we are, the answer is yes, we're aware, but there's just nothing that warrants our level of interaction at this point. So,
Well, if they haven't been in there in 6 months or a year, I think they should. How do you get them to go?
yeah, I don't know what their typical process is, if they follow up on a regular basis or if it's just based on conversations or what. But as I say, that's ultimately a county issue to deal with the insides and the individual. That's not something that we even have codes to deal with locally.
That sounds like there needs to be somebody needs help and needs to be evaluated, and you can't help a person with mental illness unless they're evaluated. So I would encourage us to do whatever we can or send a letter
Yeah, I mean, certainly we'll follow up again with the county departments, just to, obviously one of the things that can trigger, additional further review in my experience is where the local municipality is taking actions. Now this is a little bit different in that it's just cleaning up the outside and there aren't structural issues. But we've had instances where there were significant structural issues that the house itself became uninhabitable because the roof was, ready to cave in.
Right.
And that created an issue that the health department then was, kind of forced to step in to deal with. But as I say, we don't have evidence of that level of issue yet. It's just the debris on the outside that raises the concerns for us. So.
Other questions? I think like most counties, a lot of the primary cuts come to the health departments and the mental health areas. We know that there's a known problem within Wisconsin, and I think a lot of states on mental health issues, and they're trying to address it in many different ways, but it never seems to be in a fully positive manner that helps those that really need it. And it seems in this instance, that this person really needs help and doesn't have the family support there to bring it forward. And that's just a set of circumstances. That's a shame for this woman's life, but it has an impact on the neighborhood and on neighbors, which is obvious. And it's difficult. That's why I look at volunteers, but if someone doesn't want to be helped, they could probably call the police on somebody if you went in there and tried to clean it up without their permission. I've seen pictures of it, and a lot of it's just trash. It's just trash everywhere. Like your garbage can blew over every day for 6 months is kind of what it looks like. But there are other pieces in there too that are kind of strikingly antique in ways. It's really eclectic in the way that that yard looks. But it is definitely a circumstance where this person needs help, and we'll do everything we can to try to find that. But the county also needs to start looking at those needs within the whole county too, because it's not shrinking, it's growing.
Right.
And there's a lot of cases like that out there, unfortunately. But we'll stay on top of it and continue to give reports so that everybody's aware of what we can do and how it's progressing as best as we possibly can. I do appreciate the residents signing the petition and bringing it forward so that it is showing that it is a concern throughout and not just a couple of neighbors nearby that are having an issue. It's a full neighborhood issue and are looking for ways that they can address it to a way that works best for them and only for the, ma'am, I'm sorry, I can't let you talk. For them. So we'll see, and we'll continue to upgrade and update as we go forward. Next item under new business is item B, application for appointment of successor agent Quick Trip number 631 W188 North 10963 Maple Road. Agent for consideration Tammy Swickla. We have items B, C, D, E, F, G, and H that are all similar. You can take them all together or separate, however you like. Trustee Hudson.
I'll make a motion to approve B, C, D, and E.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion on the motion to approve. No discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. You went down to E, Trustee Hudson?
Correct.
All right, item F, application for a temporary outside premise extension, Busdum's Pub and Grill Car Show.
Motion to approve new business item F.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Trustee Ball.
So what came through the earlier meeting today was to what extent are we issuing these outdoor temporary permits? The illustration shows the entire property is to be allowed for this event. How many vehicles are gonna be there? How many people are gonna be there? How much parking is gonna be there? What are they doing for toilets in this event? It is going to become a problem as we look at all these type of outdoor extension permits as to what are we actually allowing? And what are the limitations that they can do? So I brought it up on both of these tonight that there are two items that have an outdoor premises extension. I would like to either have that discussion now or should it go back to planning department to establish rules for these outdoor permit areas? What are we doing for it?
Trustee Hudson.
I echo many of trustee Baum's concerns. I think that we have to start asking a little more in-depth questions on the form, so the form doesn't talk about the number of people that are expected or the number of temporary toilets that are needed. And I think at a minimum, I think we need to change our form to start asking some more questions, because again, I agree with trustee Baum that we're going to have to wrestle with some pretty significant issues around outdoor permit extensions in the very near future.
Village clerk.
Thank you. Thank you, Village President. I will piggyback on that. I too agree that the form needs to be revised. I came into this form and I think it needs to be a little bit more specific. That is on my list of things to do. I will tell you the process in-house that we do for this temporary expansion. It goes before, the application is sent for the background investigation and for police department approval, fire department approval. In addition to, we do send it to our building inspections department and to our planning and zoning. So all of them have to agree and approve said application. And if they have any issues, concerns, or questions, then my staff and RI would reach out to the applicant to get those additional questions answered. Again, I don't disagree that the application needs to be revised. I will sit down with our village attorney when we get to that point to make it a little bit more specific. Reach out to each of you to say, what would you like to see on said application? Being that this is not a Department of Revenue application, it is an in-house application. We can really tweak it the way we want, and what your input will be, we will make sure that will be on there. But as it relates specifically to this request, it was again sent before each of those 4 entities that we just spoke about with no concerns or issues at this time.
And it is also a one-day event.
It is in fact a one-day event, and so they're asking, correct.
For item F, so I just want to.
Are they current with all their fees, back taxes, anything else?
Yes.
Okay.
There has been, now, because this is just a temporary event, I might want to take that response back, that answer back. As to my knowledge, they don't have anything that is back paid, but we certainly collect on anything from any of our businesses requesting to renew their renewal alcohol beverage license. We go from the utility department, property taxes, pack paid water, any outstanding building inspection fees. For this temporary event, however, that was not checked. We don't typically do that. We just do that on the renewal period.
I know, I want to ask because I know that this operation has been before this board before for back taxes, I think more than once.
Mhm.
All right, we have a motion on the floor in a second.
Give me just a moment. I
Sure.
actually looked at my current spreadsheet.
That's what I call fishing.
Yeah.
I actually just looked at the county's website. The taxes do appear to be paid in full for each of the last number of years, so.
Show you how quick.
Really good.
He was faster.
Good job,
Took-
Mark. Thank you.
You took her away, took it right away from her, didn't you? All right, further discussion on a motion to approve. No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. One opposed,
Trustee Baum.
1 or 2? Just one?
Just me.
Okay,
one.
just you.
Get that up here.
Sure. Next item is G, application for a reserve combination Class B fermented malt beverage and intoxicating liquor license for Sol Agave Taste of Mexico LLC, located at North 112 West 16344 Mequon Road. Agent for consideration, Juan Fuentes Hernandez.
I'll make, oh, go ahead.
Trustee Hudson.
I'd like to make a motion to approve a regular Class B fermented malt beverage and intoxicating liquor license
Second.
for Sol Agave, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Second.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Village President. The reason why we are, our trustee Hudson is making a motion to approve it as a regular, and the petitioner or the applicant is in our audience now. We have just learned at 4:15 PM on today's date, May the 6th, that we have a regular license available. So the reserve license and that reserve fee would be now in void. The way that this came about is my staff was sending out per my direction a new publication 302 for alcohol beverage retail license holders. And when it went out to an individual that had ownership here, Chas Hastings, of previous businesses, he advised in an email that he no longer operates this business and that it's been closed since December 2023. However, Mr. Hastings did not comply, or I guess failed to reach out to the clerk's department to advise us of this closing. So we don't go around, and looking to see what all businesses are open or closed. Unfortunately, he did not let us know until this email today. So with that being said, I've asked him to submit to me in writing on today's date that he is surrendering that license, which brings us back to one regular being available.
Okay, so then we can approve a regular license for this establishment. Good.
And save him like $9,500.
Just,
Attorney.
what premise did he relinquish his license for?
This address here,
Mamma Mia's.
6344, which used to be the Mama Mia's.
Okay, so it's this property and, okay.
Yes.
I made sure that it's exactly this premise. He had two previous, that Chad Hastings had previously to the two that was just purchased for Beer Stube in the Supper Club by Sunbo, and it is the two that's one. So this is the exact address. And the applicant in the audience has a new lease agreement, which shows he is now a new tenant. And that was as of about 6 to 8 weeks ago, maybe longer.
Yeah, a little longer and stuff.
Okay. We have a motion and a second discussion.
So who made the motion, please, for?
Trustee Hudson and then trustee Pieper made the second. All right, any further discussion on a motion to approve? No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unopposed? Motion carries. Next item under new business is item H, annual outside premise extension application for Solgave Taste of Mexico LLC, located at North 112 West 16344 Mequon Road of Sol Agave Taste of Mexico.
Motion to approve new business item H.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Question, this is just for that seating area that's fenced in?
Correct.
Okay. Trustee Ball.
Yeah, I just want to make my same comment that the application is not detailed enough to describe all that. So when these come forward, I will continue to make that until we get those corrected.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion to approve the annual outside premise extension?
Do we, Madam Clerk, do we have authorization by the landlord to utilize the outside area?
Been like that before.
Uh-oh.
Attorney Sadak, the application was what was previously approved for the previous tenant. There was no modifications made to the outside premise extension, so if this would have been renewed, it's the exact same.
Right, but I think that Mr. Hastings had gotten permission from the landlord in that case to utilize that outside area. His lease originally didn't include any outside area, and so they needed to get permission from the property owner to do that.
Okay.
And just looking to confirm that here.
Sure. Thank you. That's a great question. And the applicant before us, did you, per the attorney's question, did you have that in your lease agreement?
I believe I do, but I can call and make sure tomorrow that we do have permission from the owner.
Actually have a copy of your lease if you'd like me to go grab it.
We can still approve this based
Yeah.
on that premise, correct?
Yeah, perhaps we just make the approval contingent upon obtaining landlord permission if necessary.
Okay, that's all right with the motion and second?
Oh, that was.
Yes.
Okay. Further discussion? No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
One opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, sir, for coming. Next item is item I, an ordinance amending sections 1.43 and 1.46 and repealing and recreating section 1.45 of the Germantown Municipal Code relating to the establishment of trustee districts and polling places and the creation of election wards. Village attorney or village clerk? Which one?
Sure. So this is just basically a cleanup that ended up being required because of the fun that's going on at the state level. As I think all of you are aware, the Supreme Court struck down the existing state Senate and state assembly districts as being unconstitutional. As a result of that, the legislature and the governor's office were able to reach an agreement as to new maps. Those new maps, unfortunately, did not follow our ward lines and instead ended up splitting some of our wards. And as a result of that, we need to create new wards to reflect those lines just because when you have that, you end up with one ward that potentially has multiple different ballots, which just doesn't work for reporting purposes. And so you split the wards to make sure that all of the ballots within that particular ward match. They're all the same, which makes it easier. So that's what this does. It does not change any of the polling locations for any of the voters. And with Badger books, the electronic poll books, quite honestly, it's not even that much of a headache for voters because they're still going to that same location and they don't need to worry about, which line do I stand in or anything like that, because any of the poll books at that location can handle any of the wards that are at that location. So no real impact to anybody. It's really just for reporting purposes more than anything.
Is it so it's the wards within congressional and state senatorial and has nothing to do with local?
Correct. It does not change any of the elected officials at the local level. So if you are in trustee district 2, you're still going to be in trustee district 2. You just may switch which ward you're in, based on the change at the state level.
As I heard that Germantown's been split into 3 assembly districts. There's 3 different assembly districts within Germantown now.
Correct.
Our state senator will then become
Assembly.
Dewey Stovall.
Oh, yeah, Dewey.
So those are some of the impacts of the changes for us. Before we used to be all under 1, correct? Yeah. So now we're 3. All right.
I'll move approval of agenda item I.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Next item is item J, Economic Development, Washington County, 2024 subscription and discount for unused credits. Village Administrator.
Yes, thank you. During the April cycle, I included on the General Government and Finance Committee the annual subscription for economic development in Washington County, along with a modification to that subscription that would allow for the application of unused credits or basically unused time from Economic Development Washington County staff to be applied to next year's subscription costs. At General Government and Finance, that request failed on a 2-2 vote. President Wolter, considering the longstanding relationship that we had with Economic Development Washington County, asked me to place this on the agenda for consideration by the full board. I did check that with the village attorney, who confirmed that this is an item that could be considered by the full board, notwithstanding the vote at the General Government and Finance level. So that is before you here this evening, and can answer any questions you'd like about the subscription or the modification to the subscription that you might have.
Trustee Jan Miller.
With all due respect, this was voted down in General Government and Finance. There,
Tied 2-2, but.
it fails.
Mhm.
If it's tie, it fails. So I don't understand why we are even looking at this. It was turned down and we shouldn't be discussing this. Having a relationship with someone, doesn't give you an extra, I don't know, it doesn't give you permission to say, well, yes, we should have the subscription to this. Also, it's concerning that if something fails on a committee level, why would it go forward?
Sure. So I'll try to answer some of those questions. The first thing to recall or remember is that this particular amount was part of the approved budget that this body approved. This is a longstanding contract. No, I shouldn't say that. The contract itself is actually relatively new. It goes back only a handful of years to 2021 or 2022, as I recall. That it was a change that was put in place basically to try to reflect the fact that some communities were using services more than others and try to equalize that in some way that made sense. Prior to that, the village board had approved on an annual basis what they called a donation to the EDWC, and that donation goes back all the way to EDWC's founding back in 2005. So a long-standing relationship that's there. Why that matters is because the provisions within the code that talk about who has authority and contracts is not really an authority on contracts per se. What that provisions talk about in its section 3.08 within the code, it talks about purchase authorizations. And in short, what that section says is that if there is a budgeted item for which we look to spend money, that you have certain levels for which you have to get various approvals. So if it's up to $2,500, the department head can approve that. If it is up to $7,500, the village administrator can. Up to $15,000, the committees can approve that expenditure. And then lastly, anything over $15,000 requires full village board approval to make that expenditure. That does not imply that you can at the committee level say, nope, we're going to just terminate this contract. That's not what that language says. This only says that you are approving the expenditure that the village board had otherwise previously budgeted for. If it was not a budgeted expenditure, that expenditure needs to come back to the village board no matter what. In addition, even without that language and without the what's there, you have at the end of the day an agreement that the village board as a whole has had a long-standing relationship with. Certainly nothing in that language contemplates that a committee on its own can affect that relationship. Then lastly, quite honestly, even if there was language that said, hey, we're going to let the committee do a contract and approve a contract or deny a contract that the village board otherwise had previously approved, any one of you in conjunction with somebody else can put an item on the village board agenda. That would include something that a committee otherwise rejected. President Walter, because he controls the agenda, has the added benefit of he can just do that without an additional signature, which is what was done here. And so, in short, having it come before this body, I think is appropriate. We did talk, Trustee Miller and I talked this morning. Certainly an option might be if there's, concerns about the level of effort that's being put in or the specific terms, that it could be referred either back to a committee, to GGF or to a different committee for a review and analysis. But certainly before this board, it is an appropriate item for action.
You still have the floor.
So GGF was within the dollar range to approve or disapprove this. It doesn't sound like what's 30308 is purchasing authorization. Is that the state or the Muni code?
That
30
is the municipal code.
Thank you. And there is no information, and we didn't get any information on GGF. I'm on GGF. We didn't know. There's no contract that was ever assigned to this or attached to this. This contract is not that old. It's only a couple years old. What we were doing before was basically funding them with a stipend. It wasn't a per hour thing. And if Mr. Kreklow is saying that we have some hours credit, or it's called unused credits towards left, then we should use that and find out where we are. There should be a table here that tells us how many hours we spent that are used up, that are in the subscription. I mean, I see no evidence of that. And so to say that there's something left, I don't know what the number is. And it is not an automatic contract. And the GGF also looks at contracts on an annualized basis.
It actually is an annual contract that automatically renews unless you provide notice that you're going to terminate.
Well, I
So-
don't have the contract. How would I know that?
Well, and as we talked about, I think based on what's in the packet, my recommendation would be that sending it back to a committee is perfectly acceptable because you don't have the information before you to make a decision that you might need to make. I don't remember if it was in the GGF packet or not, to be honest. But that's certainly, as we discussed, a reason why you potentially could send it back to committee for review, whether it's GGF or a different committee.
Trustee Bo,
Make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
motion made and seconded, discussion. Trustee Hudson.
Are there any time constraints to approving this? I mean, it does sound somewhat prudent to perhaps have the contract to look at. So, I mean, if we refer it back to committee, is there an issue with that?
No, there's no issue with that. And just one thing to clarify, the change with the credit is going forward. It's not in the past, so there's no balance that we're looking at going forward. And Economic Development Washington County is they're working on a process to provide regular statements that indicate how many of these credits we've used in any particular year and where we are at various points. But there's no balance, either negative or positive, that's being applied going forward.
So there's no, they keep track as we use credits, but we're semi-unaware. I'll couch my language. We're semi-unaware of what we're using until the end of the year, or what do you say?
It's a new process.
Is it an actual process, or is it a process to be?
It's a process under construction.
So it's a process to be?
Yeah. So, and I think it's part of their efforts to try to balance the amount of time that they're providing to the different municipalities within Washington County. And in addition to that, they provide other things like access to economic statistic databases, some other resources that are standard to everyone.
Grants.
Grants.
But again, if we refer this back to committee, we don't jeopardize any of that.
No, because as the village attorney said, the contract is in essence automatically renewed unless there is action. So.
And when is this process to be, or or whatever your choice was. When is this
You know,
process to be created? When is it going to be created?
I haven't followed up with Economic Development Washington County on the status of that. And if it gets referred back or if whatever the board would like to do, and I can provide an update at another GTF meeting, and reach out to them and find out, what the status of that is.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Trustee Baum.
I'll try an amendment to see if this works, but I'd like to send it back to committee to finalize the language of the contract only.
I'll second. GGF? Thank you. Second.
Motion made to amend
Amend.
and seconded. Discussion on the motion to amend. What's the hesitancy?
Are you asking?
Yeah, I'm asking
Oh.
you.
I don't have enough information, and this board doesn't have enough information, and Mr. Krecklow isn't getting the information. How do we know that we're getting
In
the
the past, we
hours, or
made
do you want me
economic
to answer
development
your
of
question,
Washington
Mr.?
County.
Are you going to continue
Go
to
ahead,
interrupt?
Go ahead.
It says we've had a relationship with them for over 10 years. But the fact of the matter is, at the level that this subscription is, the leader subscription, it wasn't even available 3 years ago. So this contract, this newer contract, has to be within the last 3 years because they didn't have this. And I'd like to also know what other municipalities have signed up for this. Why couldn't they, if this is the second, let's just say it's the second year, why didn't we get data on what we used if we have credits? How can they say that we have credits if we don't even have a receipt that says we
Going
have credits?
forward, not credit for past.
Well,
If I could, they're not saying that we have a credit. They're saying that they are going to start utilizing a credit system going forward.
Washington County has been, economic development has been very integral in bringing, a fair amount of business here. It was very integral in taking our TIF 4 business park when it was upside down and borrowing money from TIF 3 and making it profitable and selling it out and coming back, closing it 3 years early when it was in the red at one time with $1.5 million plus to all the taxing bodies.
okay.
Washington County Economic Development also has access to all the databases for the different licenses and information that we would use when we would look at any type of development or any type of process going forward. We don't have those licenses. They do. They pay their yearly fees and spread out that across the total of the county. They have done more for this village than we can ever pay back at $10,000 a year. They have brought millions and millions of dollars into this village through their help and support and all the different types of recruitment that they've done for us. And to hold them back for $10,000, to me, is a slap in their face for all the help that they've given us.
I think it's worthwhile to understand what the new contract is and what their capabilities are, because TID 4 probably closed, I don't know, 7 years ago, maybe?
They're also involved in other developments going
Well,
forward.
that's
TID 4 is
great.
a-
Well, what can they do for us now? Let's have a contract.
I can understand being new on the board and not having the history that most of the other board members have had with
It's
them
not
here and
most.
how much they have brought this village forward. But you're really, I think it's a disrespectful move not to give that $10,000 to them.
Well,
Very disrespectful.
I don't think it is.
I think it is. And,
Mr. President, you saying that is disrespectful.
no, it's not.
I think you should keep your thoughts to yourself.
That'd be your opinion, ma'am.
That's right.
Trustee Miller.
Prior to this year, there was no accounting. It was a donation to them.
Right. It's a different program
donation.
now. That's what I'm
Exactly.
saying.
So now you have accounting and now you're balking at the price. I don't understand that. Before we didn't have any accounting, we donated the money to them We weren't sure what we used or how much they owed us. Now they're doing the accounting on it and they're giving us credit if we don't use enough of the hours. So why would you say that that isn't a contract? I mean, I don't understand that. I don't
We
see
didn't
any
see this.
reason that this would have to go back to GGF. This should be approved tonight.
Trustee Peeper.
Let's not forget what the Economic Development of Washington County did for the Economic Development Committee in Germantown, that we went extremely over our credits with them and they did not charge us. They gave it to us for free because they wanted to see it come to fruition. They did not charge us. They literally spent time on Germantown for free, and a lot of it.
So just by, I don't know what I'm looking at right now, and it's not a full contract. I can see a paragraph.
Sure, just, I just pulled up basically the amendment. It is a, effectively
Oh,
one-page
it's
document.
interesting. You have a contract, but we don't.
That's there. Well, I don't control what goes in the packet, so I'm just showing you what I have, in terms of what's here.
That's
And the only reason I pulled it up was just to explain, and to show in writing that what the amendment does is on a moving forward basis. So, in other words, we have a certain level of fees, and hours that are associated with the level that we are at.
Right. What are they?
And moving forward, what they've decided is that if you, then in your annual renewal have excess hours or additional hours that you didn't use, that you get credit for those hours, it reduces your annual renewal fee in the subsequent year. That's what the amendment does, and that's what the language.
Well,
says.
let's see what the numbers are. It says it in writing, but it wasn't in our packet, and we don't have enough information to vote on this right now. And we have a motion that's been amended to send it back to GGF.
Trustee Baum.
So the intent of my motion and what I said in the motion is to send it back to GGF only to review the language of the contract.
Right.
But tonight,
Repeat that, I want to make sure my motion.
Put your
mic on.
mic on.
my motion was to send it back to GGF only to review the language of the contract, not to vote on it at GGF again to approve it. I want it approved tonight. I want it approved here. Yes, GGF should review contracts. Let them review the contract, but tonight we approve the overall.
It's in the budget.
Yeah, so it needs to be approved.
It's part of the budget that everybody approved.
I didn't vote for the budget. I did not vote for the budget.
Still passed.
I understand.
When it passes, you still have to back the
I
budget because now
understand.
it's what it's supposed to be. Even if
So
you
we
didn't
can
vote for
still-
it, you still need to follow the budget because that's what it is today. Because the majority of the board voted for it, and simply because you didn't vote for it doesn't mean you don't have to follow it.
There's a motion on the floor.
I understand the premise and I understand what we're
That's
doing.
Great.
Further discussion? Trustee Cutts.
In the summary explanation, you say the modification would allow the village to purchase additional credits. If they do that, or if we do that, where does that money come from? Because that's not budgeted, right?
That's correct. If we purchased, if there was a need to purchase additional credits, we would have to identify a funding source, transfer money from a different account, or, and that would be something staff would have to do before bringing that forward, is to identify what other funds could be used, and make that recommendation to the village
It
board.
would require village board approval.
Mhm.
I just come out of the checkbook, general fund.
So when does
Trustee
it
Jan Miller.
automatically renew?
Trustee Jan Miller.
It's just still.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry,
She had
Ms.
the floor.
Cutts, you still have the floor.
So you said it automatically renews? I'm sorry, you said it automatically renews unless we cancel. Do you know when that renewal date is?
It is, I believe, January 1st, and they need 90 days notice, as I recall. I'm just looking at the old agreement here just to confirm that.
I thought the date on the contract was March 7th, 2024.
Mhm.
Was what was on the board, was it not?
That was the amendment related to the credits.
Thanks.
So we're already set for this year.
Mhm.
If they want to change anything, it would have to be done for next year, 2025.
Right, so, yeah, so
canceling.
the term is January 1 to December 31, automatic renewal. If you don't provide at least 90 days notice prior to the end of the term, that it renews under its existing terms. Again, what the proposed amendment does is amends the current contract to call for that when we get to that renewal period, we would get credit for any time that hadn't been used.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to amend. Does everybody understand the motion to amend? Trustee Hudson.
No.
Trustee Hudson, the motion to amend is to send it back to review the contract, but not to stop the vote. Because that's what GGF does, is they review contracts.
So it would be approved with Washington County and then GGF would review the
Contract to see what the credits would look like, yes, but as was discussed or actually said by village attorney, we've already approved what we have for this year. We're just putting the money to it now.
Thank you
Within the budget.
thank you for explaining that.
Further discussion on the motion to amend. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Back to the motion as amended. Further discussion.
What does this do?
This puts out the 10,000 to the economic development of Washington County.
Just clarify.
Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Warren,
Aye.
trustee Cutts,
Aye.
trustee Baum,
Aye.
trustee Jan Miller,
Nay.
trustee Phil Hudson,
Aye.
trustee Peeper. Aye. Trustee Rick Miller.
Aye.
Village President Walter.
Aye. Motion passes. Next item is item K, informational report on acquisition of Grossnick property. Village attorney or village administrator?
Well, I'll start out and the village attorney may want to jump in. Just wanted to provide some background for the board, as well as members of the public on the acquisition of, what's been referred to as the Grossnick property. The 2050 land use plan, which did include a significant amount of feedback from village residents. And one of the messages that came through was a desire for redevelopment and enhancements in the village center district. And after completion and adoption of that plan, village staff came forward to the village board with information that there were 2 parcels that were potentially available for purchase that could be important to the redevelopment efforts. And those parcels were both owned by Jerry Grossnick. One was on Fond du Lac Avenue, a small office building, the other on Main Street, a vacant 5 acres. The village board, after reviewing these, determined that control of those would be beneficial to those efforts, and directed staff to work towards acquisition of the properties. The village attorney in particular produced an offer to purchase that was submitted to Grossnick. And then over the course of approximately a year, we went through a series of negotiations, and as well as due diligence. Staff regularly briefed the village board on the progress of negotiations and due diligence. And oftentimes, most of the time, those briefings took place in closed session. And the rationale for having those things in closed session was to protect the taxpayers during the negotiation process. So if the board gave direction to the village attorney to say, we're willing to pay up to X dollar amount, but we want you to go in for an offer with an offer that is lower than that. Obviously, if that was a conversation that took place in open session, it would put the village at a disadvantage for negotiation. So that's why statute allows those types of closed session discussions, and that's the way that the village board used closed sessions in this process. Ultimately, all of those final issues were resolved, and there was agreed upon purchase price of $1,078,000. The board has not yet decided a specific use for the property, and determination of how that property will ultimately be used will be a separate process, and that will go before the Plan Commission, and there will be opportunities for citizen input. So some of the next steps here, the closing on the properties is scheduled for June 7th. And there have been some questions that have been addressed to me about how the payment, where the cash would come up, how this would be financed. The village has adequate cash on hand to make the payment for the property on the 7th at closing. However, we would need to provide some financing beyond that before the end of the fiscal year. And the process that ultimately the village board will have to approve, but that I'll be recommending is that later on this year, we issue a bond anticipation note to basically reimburse our cash reserves for that $1,078,000. And this is a process that we've used in the past. When we purchased 2 parcels for the DPW facility and TID 9, we used a similar process. We paid the initial purchase price out of cash reserves and then later on reimbursed the general fund on a bond anticipation note. And then that provides some flexibility for the village board going forward. You could decide to take a whole number of paths with the property. You may decide to resell it to a developer at some point in the future who has plans for it that fit in with what the village is looking for in the village center district. You may decide to make improvements to the property and then resell it. This would allow you, the bond anticipation note would allow you to do that. You may decide that you want it to be a parking lot or a green space. There are any number of options that the village board has. Utilizing a bond anticipation note allows for the financing while you go through that decision-making process. And ultimately, that would be refinanced if necessary, if we wouldn't recover the full price that we paid for the property through a sale. It would be we would be refinancing in essence through probably a general obligation bond at some point in the future. So I just again wanted to provide that brief overview on where we've been, where we are, and what's coming up, and answer any questions you might have.
Trustee Baum.
Do we have a time frame from our Director of Planning Department as to when we are going to start these neighborhood meetings?
I believe the Plan Commission's priority for those plans were the Holy Hill District and the Freistadt District. And those are kind of queued up to start. I think that part of the delay has been looking at the railroad crossing requests that we've discussed as being a critical piece of information before those can go forward. It is possible that we can talk with the Plan Commission about adjusting the time frame and moving the Village Center District up or starting that while we're waiting for that railroad crossing information.
So they're imminent.
Yeah.
Microphone on.
Thank you.
Other questions? Trustee Jan Miller.
You're saying that we're going to take $1,078,000 out of the general fund to pay for this, for the closing on June 7th, 2024 for the Grosvenor property?
Technically, it'll be out of our general cash balance, but which is primarily the general fund, yes.
And then you said, well, at the end of the fiscal year, we might have to get additional financing or finance it. I wasn't clear on that.
What I would recommend is the next time we issue debt, that we would include in that debt a bond anticipation note that would basically replenish the cash that the village has available.
If we lower our general cash fund, does that have anything to do with the Moody's rating?
No,
Okay. What kind of a bond note would we be looking at? How long? 5-year?
the bond anticipation note is typically anywhere from 3 to 5 years. It's different than, it's different than, when we issue general obligation bonds, for example, because it's something that can be paid off at any time. So as we're, and typically they are refinanced. So if you look back at the DPW facility, and I mentioned, I think that was a 5-year bond anticipation note. We ended up refunding that, refinancing that with general obligation debt, probably 9 months after it was issued. So it depends on the length of time that the board wants to take to determine what you want to do with the parcels.
I would be in favor of getting getting a neighborhood meeting on the village center before the other properties or the other districts, the Holy Hill and Freistadt, because it seems like you're waiting even for applying for the railroad. I thought there was a comment about that.
That is going to take longer than I think was anticipated when the determination was made to go ahead with Freistadt and Holy Hill. I think there is a change in our understanding of how long that railroad application process is going to take.
And we have the money for this property, but this year we had to cut budgets in for the library and also Park and Rec. So I would anticipate we would be able to fund those two departments to 100% from 2023.
Well, you're really talking about apples and zebras.
I know,
Um,
but I'm just saying, if we can find $1 million, perhaps we can find $225,000, about 250,000.
Again, I mean, you're looking at completely different financial processes.
Right, but it's still money that we're spending.
It would be like,
We take out.
I'm trying to think of a home analogy here. But
Okay,
the library and the rec programs are an ongoing expense. So it'd be like paying your annual grocery bill and saying, I'm going to take the money that I borrowed for my house, and instead of paying my mortgage or instead of actually buying the house, I'm going to use that money to pay my grocery bill or to go buy some, a new wardrobe. You can't use bond anticipation notes or cash reserves to fund ongoing operations.
I'm saying that we could probably find something. Those are all the questions I have for, and then this Grosnick property, it was also on the Next Generation Housing, in their minutes to the meeting, and it was labeled, these were labeled. So does that mean that we're obligated in any way with Washington County, since it was on their report, to utilize this property for Next Gen Housing?
No.
And they're not going to come back to us and ask for it?
No, one of these properties, one of these parcels was one of about a dozen properties within Germantown that were considered by the county's Next Generation Housing Committee. They, the committee developed a scoring system that looked at different factors which would indicate the suitability of all of the different sites. There were probably about, I don't know, 75 sites countywide that were considered as potential sites. And they looked at things like, does the location have access to sewer and water service? For example, was one of the criteria. And the county scoring system had this towards the top of the list of parcels that would be suitable, but there's no obligation that the village has to move forward with next generation housing. If that's something you would like to pursue, there may
Not at
be
all.
county funds that would be available to do that, but that's you know, that's an option that you'd probably we could look a little bit more closely with the county if that's the direction you're giving.
That's not the direction I would go.
No, and in fact, I also would remind you that that was one of the reasons why we pursued acquisition of this parcel, was to prevent a developer from seeking those county funds to try to pursue that type of development in this location. It was not something that I think by and large the board was supportive of, and acquiring the property was one way of making sure that that didn't happen.
How long do you think we'll have to hold on to this property before we sell it or find a way to utilize it?
I think that's entirely up to the village board. And,
Well,
you know, you can do that as quickly as you would like. If if you would like to have a longer community input process, you know, then it's going to take a little bit longer to determine what the potential uses are, and we'll hold on to it longer. If there's something that a majority of the board has agreed upon to move forward with sooner, then we wouldn't have to hold on to it as long. That really is a decision that's up to the board.
it'll cost us more if we hold on to it longer.
There will be, you know, there is a holding cost, a small holding cost to the property, and the longer that we take to decide what to do with it, the greater that holding cost is.
Any questions, other questions? Trustee Kutch, did you have your hand up earlier? Okay. Other questions? We can go on to the next item. I'll start with item L, strategy concerning acquisition of properties in the Village Center District in the general area of Mequon Road and Pilgrim Road. The village board may convene into a closed session per, Wisconsin statutes 19.85 subsection 1 subparagraph E, for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, investing in public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, and then may reconvene into open session to take such action as it deems
Motion to
appropriate.
go into closed session for new business item L with the following people here. Brian, I'm guessing, Brian, Steve, you may go home, Donna, I'm guessing. And that's it. And the board, obviously.
We need,
You have a second? None of
I'll
the
second it.
engineer or public works?
No,
Okay.
no, we're
You
good.
want me to say minus Phil
All
Hudson
right.
too?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Trustee Warren,
Aye.
trustee Ketz,
Aye.
trustee Baum,
Aye.
trustee Jan Miller,
Aye.
trustee Hetson,
Aye.
trustee Pieper,
Aye.
trustee Rick Miller,
Aye.
village president Walter.
Before we go into closed session, our next village board meeting will be on Monday, May 20th.
I don't ever
Thank
eat
you all
yellow
for
or
coming.
green
Thank you all for watching. Have a good night.
candy.
Turn off your microphones, please.